Welcome back to the Future Archive. Today, we examine archived broadcasts from August 2, 2026, a day when Europe faced a disturbing rise in juvenile contract killings, geopolitics played out in real-time tweets, Italy sweltered under historic heat, disinformation reshaped migration debates, and a statue in Uganda became a curious footnote in diplomatic history. Let us begin. The first story. Teenage Hitmen, Europe's shadow economy of youth assassins. In the summer of 2026, law enforcement across Europe uncovered a disturbing trend. Teenagers were being recruited as contract killers. Investigations revealed that criminal networks, often operating through encrypted social media platforms, targeted vulnerable youth, many from marginalized communities, with promises of money, status, or escape from personal crises. Authorities in Germany, France, and the Netherlands reported at least 17 confirmed cases where minors, some as young as 14, carried out or attempted killings. The perpetrators were typically lured through online forums, groomed with ideological justifications, or simply paid small sums, often under €5,000. The killings were difficult to trace, as the teenagers used disposable phones and untraceable payment methods. Police noted that many of these youth had no prior criminal records, making them less suspicious to targets. This phenomenon exposed the dark synergy between social media's reach and the erosion of youth opportunities in post-pandemic Europe. By 2050, historians would categorize this as an early symptom of the gig crime era, where informal labor markets extended into illegal acts. The use of minors exploited legal gaps. Juvenile justice systems were ill-equipped to handle transnational conspiracy charges. Ironically, the same platforms that once promised to connect the world became the ideal recruitment tool for its most desperate actors. Humanity's favorite strategy of ignoring systemic cracks until they became canyons was, as ever, in full effect. Progress, it seems, had a body count. The second story. Trump cancels Iran strikes pending a rapid deal. On August 2, 2026, then U.S. President Donald Trump announced the cancellation of planned airstrikes against Iran, contingent on a diplomatic agreement being reached rapidly. The strikes had been prepared in response to Iran's alleged support for proxy attacks on American assets in Syria. Trump's statement, delivered via social media, framed the pause as a negotiating tactic, though critics argued it was an attempt to avoid military escalation without a clear strategy. The international community reacted with a mix of relief and skepticism, as the rapid timeline was undefined. Iran's foreign ministry called the move a tactical retreat, while European allies privately expressed concern over the unpredictability of U.S. policy. This episode exemplified the 2020s approach to diplomacy: public, performative, and subject to the whims of domestic political cycles. By 2050, such last-minute pivots would be studied as early examples of algorithm diplomacy, where leaders prioritized viral optics over substance. The incident also foreshadowed the eventual normalization of military posturing as a bargaining chip, a practice that, by mid-century, had become so routine it barely merited headlines. One wonders if the rapid deal was ever intended to be rapid, or if the word was chosen for its alliteration. In the theater of geopolitics, the curtain call often came before the play. The third story. Italy's cities under highest heat alert as climate records shatter. In August 2026, Italy issued its highest heat alert for nearly all major cities, including Rome, Milan, and Naples, as temperatures soared above 45 degrees Celsius, 113 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat wave, part of a broader European climate crisis, triggered mass evacuations of elderly and vulnerable populations, rolling blackouts due to strained energy grids, and the temporary closure of tourist sites like the Colosseum. Hospitals reported a 30% increase in heat-related illnesses, while wildfires raged in southern regions. The government declared a state of emergency, but critics noted that the infrastructure, from public cooling centers to water distribution, was woefully unprepared. Climate scientists warned that such events would become annual occurrences, a prediction that by 2050 had proven painfully accurate. The 2026 heatwave was a stress test for European climate adaptation, and the results were not encouraging. Despite decades of warnings, cities remained designed for 20th century temperatures, and emergency responses were reactive rather than strategic. This event marked the beginning of the Great Subsidization era, where governments poured resources into mitigating crises that could have been prevented with earlier action. The reliance on air conditioning, itself a contributor to the problem, highlighted the paradox of modern climate policy. The Great Spreadsheet Crisis was also in attendance, as bureaucrats struggled to allocate funds for crises they had long ignored. The future arrived and found us sweating in the past. The fourth story. Spain's migrant crisis inflamed by AI-driven disinformation. In 2026, Spain faced a surge in migrant arrivals from North Africa, a humanitarian challenge that was rapidly weaponized by political actors. Social media platforms, amplified by AI-driven algorithms, spread disinformation about the scale and impact of migration, fueling xenophobic backlash. False claims, such as migrants receiving luxury benefits or being prioritized over citizens for housing, went viral despite being debunked by fact-checkers. Politicians from far-right parties exploited the narratives, using targeted ads to stoke fear. The crisis revealed how AI could supercharge division. Bots generated fake news stories, deepfake videos depicted staged conflicts, and micro-targeting ensured that the most inflammatory content reached the most susceptible audiences. The European Union eventually intervened, but the damage to social cohesion was lasting. This was a turning point in the intersection of migration, media, and machine intelligence. By 2050, the 2026 Spanish disinformation campaigns would be taught in universities as a case study in how AI democratized propaganda. The episode also underscored an uncomfortable truth. The most effective lies were not entirely false, but distortions of real anxieties. Governments responded with the usual flurry of AI safety committees, though these were largely ceremonial. The intern, it was later rumored, had accidentally set the algorithm's outrage dial to maximum. The machines did not invent prejudice, but they did perfect its delivery. The fifth story. Uganda erects statue of Israeli PM's brother, Entebbe raid casualty. On August 2, 2026, Uganda unveiled a statue in Entebbe honoring Yonatan Netanyahu, the brother of then-Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was killed during the 1976 raid to free hostages from a hijacked plane. The monument, a bronze figure of Yonatan Netanyahu in military gear, was placed near the old airport terminal where the raid occurred. The gesture was intended to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the operation, which had saved over 100 hostages, mostly Israeli. However, the statue also sparked controversy. Some Ugandans questioned why a foreign leader's relative was being honored over local figures, while others saw it as a diplomatic overture to Israel. The Israeli government praised the move, but historians noted the complexity of celebrating a military action that had left Ugandan soldiers dead. This statue became a symbol of how history is remembered selectively. By 2050, the Entebbe monument would be a footnote in the broader story of how nations use memorials to signal alliances, often at the expense of nuance. The decision to honor Netanyahu also reflected the 2020s trend of personalizing diplomacy, where state relationships were increasingly framed through individual stories rather than policy. One might argue that the last human meeting to decide the statue's placement could indeed have been an email. Monuments are less about the past than the message of the present. August 2, 2026 was a day of contrasts. The cold calculation of teenage killers, the hot rhetoric of geopolitics, the scorching reality of climate inaction, the manufactured fury of disinformation, and the stone-cold symbolism of a statue. Each story reveals humanity's enduring habit of solving problems only after they have become unavoidable. This has been the Future Archive. The past, as always, is not going anywhere.